Hello, thank you for joining us. My name's Peter Jahnke, and I'm the Enterprise Services Manager for the National Australia Bank in Australia. I work for the Professional Services team for Amazon Web Services, and I'm joined today by Matthew Carpenter, who's a Practice Manager for the Professional Services team. We're here to talk to you today about the National Australia Bank. The National Australia Bank is a Tier 1 financial services institution in the Australian market. It competes with the likes of Commonwealth Bank, with Westpac and other Tier 1 banks. Full service bank. It offers retail, wholesale, institutional lending, business banking, and it's around 30,000 employees, and it has 4,000 technology staff, quite a substantial business. And we're here today to talk to you about how the organisation built a mass migration program and moved through that vision to experimentation and to scale. So the format for today's session will be as follows. There will be three main sections that we're going to talk about. The first section will be talking about how we created momentum. Fundamentally, creating momentum here was about establishing a foundation for shared learning, shared excellence, and a real vision for how the bank needed to execute on this migration journey. Also, when we worked to the migration at scale, how did we flip that forward to a migration at scale? We really worked with the bank to work through the processes of changing the muscle that they built and the work that they had done to create a migration at scale. And most importantly, for the customers and the teams in the audience who are interested in why this is so important, we will talk you through some of the challenges and lessons learned. So in terms of creating momentum and helping drive change, I think it's important to underscore that the bank itself has made some very public statements around what they would like to do with their journey in technology. They've stated they're spending close to 4.5 billion Australian dollars on investments around technology and improving the technology outcomes. And it's clear that by publicly stating this, that they're investing heavily in the transformation of their business. And that technology transformation is anchored around a concept that they call industrialisation. Industrialising processes, industrialising their business models, industrialising technology, and really looking to capture the benefits of transforming technology through aspects such as cloud. But of course, like any legacy organisation, the National Australia Bank is still struggling with legacy infrastructure challenges, is still a very large organisation with a number of legacy platforms and technology vendors that it needs to support the transformation around. And really, it's looking to the value of cloud to help deliver some of the elements to solve the problems that we see on the screen here. So the first of these problems is focused on improving resilience. For them, as a legacy infrastructure, as a business with a number of legacy providers and infrastructure, like many of your organisations probably have yourselves, they needed to focus on how do they deliver speed and agility and strong transformational value to their customer in a way that really helps them deliver on their 9 million customers in the market. And really for them, cloud is the answer to the question around improving resilience. Availability zones, regions, auto-scaling groups, concepts that are familiar to us in the audience and to Amazon are things that a legacy infrastructure footprint can benefit from as you move towards these transformative models in cloud. Around cost and complexity of change, this too is also a very important point to be thinking about when you're looking at a cloud-first strategy, because of course, as we heard on the videos in the opening session, and we hear quite often around cloud, the cost and complexity of change is very much the focus around transforming to cloud. Speed to market, provisioning servers in an on-premises infrastructure versus spinning up an environment quite quickly in Amazon. The contrast is like chalk and cheese, and it is very advantageous for businesses to look to this, and NAB is no different. And of course, for 9 million customers that they serve, improving the customer experience is paramount. For them, they want to be the #1 business bank, and they strive to achieve and maintain that goal. They also look to try and deliver amazing outcomes for their customers, and how quickly they can bring them to market. A cloud strategy really helps address that. And of course, the National Australia Bank is not new to cloud, per se. They have been on this journey for some time, and really that journey started in late 2012, early 2013. In 2012, Amazon Web Services opened our region in the Australian geography, AP Southeast, for those that are playing at home. And very shortly after that, the NAB put their nab.com.au webpage, the very public face of the bank, on Amazon Web Services. And in this phase, we would call this the crawl phase. And they're really going through this crawl phase because they are establishing the foundational elements of their cloud platform. They firstly created a cloud platform team that they called Hosted Infrastructure Platforms, which was really the anchor for developing the capability to consume cloud at scale inside the bank. They then transformed to what we call the walk phase, where they've stopped crawling and they're now embracing technology such as open source technology. MLC Wealth, they are looking at how to put what the regulator considers a material workload. So something that is quite important to the regulator, and MLC Wealth, future investments such as their foreign exchange platform, which was announced at reInvent, have been moved onto the platform subsequently. And of course, they started innovating for their customers with QuickBiz and other such innovations that deliver cloud-ready digital applications for their business banking customers. But the real change and the real inflection point came in 2017 or thereabouts with a change in leadership. And of course, I think this can't be underscored enough, that a journey such as this that the NAB is on has in large part been driven very extensively by the executives that are sitting at the top of the technology business, really driving a lot of the agenda around this capability. Patrick Wright joining as the Chief Technology and Operations Officer, Yuri Miznik, Steve Day, general managers such as Paul Roney, the head of technology platforms, the GM of technology platforms. All of these individuals galvanised behind a vision that said that the bank needed to be a technology business. They needed to focus on owning their own destiny, focus on delivering technology outcomes. And really that inflection point shows where platform-based microservices start to come through. Alexa innovations, a discovery cloud which is focused on their data lake and having services that can be consumed by internal customers. But it was also at this point where the focus on application migrations became more prevalent. And really the focus on application migrations was an inflection point where the bank started to think about how do we not only build applications for our digital consumers, for our new customers, to really use the benefits of cloud to deliver this transformation, but also we need to think about how do we better optimize the cost, risk, and agility profile of our existing applications that we have that still deliver value to our customers and to our internal consumers, but to move that to the cloud. And so migration became something that the bank needed to think about and needed to explore quite comprehensively. And really, AWS Professional Services and the NAB worked quite closely to try and understand how we could really create a strong link together to really create a foundation for the bank to scale and to move. And you'll hear Matthew and I refer to a migration muscle. What we needed to do was first create this muscle. We needed to create the desire, the foundation, the structure, the strategy with which the bank would use to deliver a migration capability. And in these foundational elements, we created the business vision, we created the guiding principles, and we created an operating model that the bank would be able to use to deliver this migration in a more scaled capacity. But in addition to that, what we needed to do was to go through a test and learn phase. And like any, I do a bit of training, and so like any muscle, it needs to be trained and exercised in order for it to grow. And so what we did was by establishing the muscle in the foundations, we needed to very quickly train that muscle and get it up to scratch and make it strong so that the bank had a real proof point that demonstrated the value that migrations could bring to them in the cloud. And so you'll often hear us refer to our leadership principles, deliver results, customer obsession. But in addition to that, we have this mantra that says, and Jeff Bezos says it, it says that good intentions don't work, but mechanisms do. And really, when you think about what this means as a fundamental principle for creating a migration strategy, before you even put one hand on a keyboard, before you even think about what you need to deliver from an outcome to which applications, to which landing zone, none of these things matter if the organisation doesn't have a shared set of leadership principles that you can stand behind to deliver this migration journey to the cloud. And so, taking that model, as we have in Amazon for our shared success with our customer, we created these migration tenets. And we created them using a number of inputs such as cloud adoption framework workshops, digital innovation workshops. We ran a series of sessions over a course of 2 or 3 weeks where we understood the customer's model. We understood the intention of what they were trying to achieve. And we really used that learning and understanding of their strategy and their principles to build these 8 leadership principles or tenets. And as you can see, they're not complicated, but they're simple in their execution, but they're very powerful in the messaging that they bring to the organisation. And a couple of them stand out as really valuable items to think about for your companies so that you can take some of the learnings from the National Australia Bank and the work we did. One of those is to think big, start small, and to grow fast. And why is that important? Because I believe that that is the mantra that cloud brings to an organisation. You can think big when it comes to doing cloud. You can think petabyte scale. You can think exabyte scale if you really want, because you have limitless capability almost in the cloud. But what you have the ability to do is to start with very small units of compute, very small units of work, and grow very quickly through hyperscaling, autoscaling, all the different things that Amazon offers as a solution, or the cloud in general, I should say. And really this resonated with the bank because large organisations tend to have politics, resistance, and the ability to scale quite quickly in an organisation that tends to not move as fast as it possibly should, like most large organisations, is very powerful. And another very powerful thing is the guardrails, not stage gates. And here, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that is that in many organisations, and any large organisation, there is a number of checks and balances, processes, governance committees, project governance boards, executive governance boards. All of these exist to create structure around governance. But what you can't do is scale a migration program or scale a very large program if they're always coming to get governance and checkpoints, because you create choke points in the flow of the organisation. And so what we set as a mindset here was that we wanted guardrails, not stage gates. So we wanted to create a safe space that teams across the bank could innovate inside of, knowing that when they put their application in the cloud, that it had a standard pattern, a standard deployment architecture, a standard way of interacting with the cloud that was safe, that was well-defined, had all the security processes and governance in place, and it was able to therefore scale the migration across the organisation. And so this is where we came up with the concept of embedding what we call Amazon Web Services, managed services into the organisation. Matthew?
Good afternoon all. I am Matthew Carpenter. I'm the Practice Manager for Financial Services in Sydney, Australia. As Peter has just explained, from the start, it was important to make sure we had the right operating models in place to ensure success at the NAB. Any modern cloud environment needs to accommodate 2 types of applications. Your cloud-native applications that are under active development, have a feature release cycle, and are true DevOps, where the development team is also the operations team, and they are running and operating that application from patching up to software development. But there's another type of application that must be accommodated. Commercial off-the-shelf applications, acquired software, or legacy software systems where the code base is no longer under active development, can still benefit from the cloud and should be allowed to do so. Therefore, at the start of the accelerated migration, we took the time to implement the AWS Managed Services platform into the National Australia Bank. By implementing AWS Managed Services, known as AMS, into the National Australia Bank, legacy software applications or commercial acquired software could take the advantages of being in the cloud, whether auto-scale, high resilience, multiple availability zone, global footprint, but without placing a burden back on the asset teams to have to onboard the operational tasks such as backup, patching, monitoring, and security review. By having this dual operating model, one for commercial acquired software or where the code base was no longer under development, and for new, born in the cloud native applications that are truly DevOps and have a CI/CD pipeline, we were able to meet the needs of the entire developer community across the bank. In addition to that, we also then allowed those asset teams and those development teams to make a dedicated choice between whether they want to invest their time, their valuable time, into being DevOps and operating some of those legacy software systems, or offloading that operational strain onto the AMS platform where things such as I mentioned, backup and patching are covered. Throughout the accelerated migration, we had an objective. As Pete talked about, the objective was to build up what we called migration muscle. Learn through doing. So the test and learn approach, or the test and learn tenet, was very important to how we did this. The way that we approached this was to build up in the bank what we call a migration dojo. A migration dojo is a small but capable cross-functional team that has all of the required skills to execute on a successful migration. The dojo embeds itself within the asset team or the application owner's team. The dojo teaches the asset team how to fish. Doesn't just show them what to do, but teaches them how they can migrate applications for the ones they are migrating and for the future. This, as Pete said, builds that migration muscle across the bank and gets us towards scale. As the dojos and the asset teams both work through their migrations, we build up a body of IP, or intellectual property, that we call patent libraries. As we solve challenges, as we prove out how certain types of software that the bank use can be moved, we prepare concise documents that capture the experience, and that information can be used by future asset teams or future dojos to accelerate their activities and enable future migrations. This creates a virtuous cycle. And one of the biggest benefits of having the dojos work with the asset teams, build out the patent library, and get that cycle going where successful migrations become the norm, you build up a confidence in the bank. You build up an energy where the organization feels it can succeed, and that in turn generates more success. I'll hand back over to Pete.
Thanks, Matthew. And really it was that shared success and feeling of achievement, having built the migration muscle, having trained that muscle through a mass migration, or through an accelerated migration program, that really led the bank to aspire to move hundreds of applications into the cloud. And this is a real inflection point for the bank, because it really takes the learnings and underpinnings that we built in the accelerated migration program and takes it to the next level by moving those hundreds of applications to the cloud. And really, one of the things that I personally worked with the bank on, as well as a number of people in the account team, was, you know, with the strategy and the intent of moving hundreds of applications to the cloud, what does that actually mean? And how do you make that message a reality for the organisation at large, internally, and also how do you make sure that publicly you're really cementing this challenge to the market and to the organisations out there? And really they did it across two key dimensions. The first was that at the end of financial year 2018, which is just after September last year, inside the full year results for 2018, the NAB very publicly celebrated this challenge that we had set ourselves and the achievement that we had made, and publicly stated in one of the appendices in their briefing document that was focused on cloud. It talked to the benefits of cloud, up to 60% saving on applications moving to the cloud, talking very openly about the fact that in the last 10 weeks of their financial year that they moved 30 applications into the cloud, cementing cloud as an agenda, openly talking about cloud as their strategy, and also, and very importantly, underpinning and underscoring their desire to move 35% of their total applications footprint into the cloud by the end of financial year 2020. So again, underscoring the hundreds of applications that they were planning to move. And interestingly, of course, external communications is very important, but equally internal communications is very important. And in many of your organisations, it's all well and good for the executives to have a strong vision and a strong drive to achieve an outcome, but they need to have the entire team walking behind them. And so a program launch was a very important part of the strategy that we worked on the bank with, to very, very openly drive a communication around, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is why we're doing it, and this is what it means to the bank in order to do this. And so that program launch had over 300 general managers, heads of technology, and also business owners, the people that own the applications that were going to be in scope, immersed in these plans, immersed in the planning of the operating model, immersed in what we were trying to achieve. And really, it showed the executives leading from the front. Steve Day presented, Yuri Miznik presented, Paul Roney presented. These strong executive leaders showed their teams that they are behind this solution and they are driving a new way of thinking in the organisation to achieve an outcome. And of course, the challenges here is that it is all well and good to have strong communication, and it is all well and good to have a really strong business that is standing behind the development of a migration plan. But of course, it will not work if you don't have a solid operating model that can underpin it. And so we worked very closely with the bank to build the operating model that you see on the screen. And of course, Matthew, as one of the key engagement leads in the organisation and working with NAB, was at the forefront of living and breathing this. And I'd like him to talk you through it a little bit now, if he could.
Thank you, Peter. I believe that having a defined operating model around how we would work with our partners was critical to our success at the NAB. As we had discussed before, the Accelerated Migration Program had created the Dojo Led Migrations. The Dojo Led Migrations had a clear scope. It was a manual team that were taking an application, uplifting the operating system and the database to the current version, and reviewing the firewall and security configurations around the application, and then deploying it to one of the two landing zones. But as Peter's just discussed, the bank had a target for migration at scale, and velocity had to be increased. In order to achieve this velocity, the concept of a migration factory was introduced. The migration factory exploits the advantages of automation and migration tooling to take applications that don't need a dojo to do that uplift and can do a pass-through migration into the cloud automated by software. By combining these two methods, we were able to increase velocity and achieve the scale the bank was looking for. it is important to recognize the role that professional services and our partners played with working with the bank. Key here was that we were able to bring the right expertise to the problem that the bank needed solved. And as we worked through each and every one of those problems, we contributed back to that patent library that we discussed before. What this means is we got migration stability. We had cloud enablement across the bank where common things such as architecture, networking, security, and others were clearly defined, and teams that were starting to tackle migrations anew were not reinventing the wheel as they had that information at hand. The final thing I'll say around the importance of the operating model is the operating model gave everyone who was playing a role in the migrations clarity on the role they had to play and how their contribution fitted into the bigger picture. And with that, I'll hand over to Pete.
Ooh, he's pushed the button too soon.
Oh, sorry.
And so, to further underscore what my role was in the execution of this operating model, now Matthew just described how, as one of the engagement leads and one of the engineering leads, he was very instrumental in being a member of the dojos, being one of the engagement leads to really drive this whole operating model. My role was very much in the governance phase. And so again, for those in the audience in a leadership position, in senior leadership positions, it's extremely important to put governance around the conversations that you're having here. And I don't mean governance to slow, I mean governance to speed and to accelerate these conversations. We created vernacular or terms in the organisation such as a clearinghouse. So we would have a weekly meeting on a Friday where issues that Matthew and the team had identified would be escalated to me and to other senior leaders in the organisation for clearing. And it was a short-circuit path through management chains to leaders that could make decisions on behalf of professional services, on behalf of the NAB, on behalf of our partners, so that you could really scale the conversation quite quickly. And there was no blockers involved in this journey. If asset teams or application owners felt that they were conflicted with priorities, we were able to very quickly escalate to Yuri Miznik, to the asset owners, to really help solve these challenges for them. So again, I underscore the strength and the importance of the leadership role in this particular objective, in driving from the front, in owning the outcomes, in really being instrumental in taking accountability for the successful outcomes of a program such as this. And so, what have we done? So we've gone through the process, we've explained the migration muscle, and we've used this term, and I would encourage you to take it for yourselves if you wish, and we've trained that muscle. And that muscle has been really exercised to drive to a mass migration. Hundreds of workloads in the cloud is the aspiration for the National Australia Bank. But of course, this whole process is certainly not without its challenges. And we have learned a number of lessons throughout this journey, some of which we will look to share. But of course, the first of which is it's extremely hard to go fast. So what I've put on the screen here for those that are trying to play at home, and of course the colours haven't shown up, but that's okay, is effectively a line diagram that describes the journey through the accelerated migration program. And it's a little bit difficult to see, and Matthew will explain it, but there were really three key phases: planning and resourcing, engineering and frameworks, and migrations and patent delivery. And the 10 weeks started from day 0, and there was a 20-day lead into the planning and resourcing. And so what I'd like to do for the audience here, and why Matthew is standing right next to me on stage, is to really talk you through some of the challenges that we faced and how we unblocked those challenges through strong leadership and executive support and the professional services partnership with National Australia Bank.
Thank you, Peter. And sorry all, as Pete alluded to, some colours haven't shown up on the screen, but I'll do my best to describe the slide. As Pete said, going fast is hard, but not impossible. We were tasked we're moving 30 applications within 50 days. No easy feat inside a large Australian bank. So we split the process into 3 phases. As you can see, we gave ourselves a very constrained and concise amount of time for planning. We measured planning in days, not weeks or months. We got underway once we had made the proposal and got agreement. We established the team and we mobilized the team, and we commenced bringing the right people across the bank to the conversation about what we were attempting to do. This all happened in less than 20 days. And on day 1 of 50, we commenced integrating the AMS platform, the landing zone that would allow us to move those commercial and acquired software applications we discussed before into the cloud on behalf of the bank. We moved quickly, and with the compelling event of achieving this in 50 days, we worked through the organization to build those landing zones, integrate them to the network, and hook them up to the federated identity of the bank. In parallel to this work, we'd commenced discovery. We'd commenced engaging with application and business owners across the bank, and we identified a portfolio of hundreds of applications as potential candidates and began to manage those applications through our discovery funnel. Are they a legitimate candidate for cloud? Can they be moved? And what are the requirements for their design? We again gave ourselves 20 days to achieve this integration, discovery, and connectivity. And then on day 21 of 50, we were moving our first batch of 5 applications, which delivered within a matter of days. That first milestone of 5 applications delivered into the cloud built momentum. It was a proof point that validated what we'd been saying and what we'd been working to for the prior weeks. And it quickly multiplied into 10 applications. And then we stuck at it. We stayed at the coalface, and we kept working our way through the challenges, the learnings, and the discoveries we needed to have the information and the knowledge in that library of patterns that we discussed earlier, so that we could make these migrations happen. And as you can see, as we got just over halfway, as we got to about application 16, application 17, all that hard work had paid off. We had broken the back of the information that we needed, the understandings that were required, and we were able to accelerate and achieve the 30 applications in 50 days. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, mate. And so to close out, my grandfather was a builder for almost 45 years. And one of the things that he told me was to measure twice and to cut once. And I think that saying really applies to everything, and no more so than in this particular case of a migration. And, again, I can't underscore this enough. One of the key learnings is investing time in communicating clearly, communicating widely, communicating always, and making sure that everybody from the executive all the way down to the engineers on the keyboards understand why we are doing this, what this is going to achieve, and the outcome this is going to generate for the business. And clearly understanding that will help provide structure and a framework to achieving outcomes that you set yourself. Hundreds of applications in the cloud is not easy, but it is achievable, and it is something that an organisation at the scale of National Australia Bank is undertaking, and of course your organisations could be in that same boat. Immersion is essential. And again, it goes back to the communication theme, but this goes a little bit deeper. New concepts such as Amazon Web Services, managed services, the concepts around landing zones are not always familiar to organisational resources that are trying to drive a cloud strategy, because the executives are driving a cloud-first agenda, the bank is driving a cloud-first agenda. Everybody wants to get onto that bus, but sometimes they just don't have the training. Now, NAB has invested heavily in their cloud guild, again, very publicly stating about their cloud guild. The immersion of cloud and training 4,000 plus employees on cloud and cloud concepts and cloud training has been really instrumental in creating that momentum. And again, immersing them in the AMS platform. We ran 2 or 3 days of immersion at a group level and then at an asset team level. We embedded engineers in the migration programs. We really immersed them in what it meant to be successful from a migration. And I can't underscore enough that that is hugely important, as is keeping a grip on scope. So the thing about keeping a grip on scope is that success has many fathers. And this project became very successful very quickly. And of course, everybody wanted to get on board. And so quickly the scope starts creeping. And Matthew, I think you might attest that it was quite challenging to keep a grip on the scope as we were really accelerating. So do you have some lessons to share for the audience around this?
Thank you, Pete. I think one of our key success factors was the fact that we did keep that tight grip on scope. As we discussed earlier, we defined our scope as the migration of an application from on-premise infrastructure to cloud. We said that we will uplift the operating system and the database to the current version of the underlying software, and that we would review the firewall and security configurations around that application, as security is paramount and always job zero. By doing this, we enabled the program to stay focused, but we also let the organization lift their gaze. We let them understand that post this program, they could look to uplift the version of their application or change the database engine. But those things were outside of the scope of this first phase. We took a big step, but we didn't let them take too big a step, and that was key to our success. I think the final piece of that puzzle, though, was getting the landing zone right. With the introduction of AMS into the bank, as we discussed before, we had those 2 landing zones, the dual operating model. This meant that application teams, no matter whether they needed the support of an operations capability to do their patching and backup and monitoring, could still take advantage of all the benefits of cloud. Auto-scale, multi-availability zone, high resilience, performance. AMS brings that to your legacy applications and your commercially acquired software. However, we also enabled the developer community who are at the forefront of building new software for the bank to be able to develop born-in-the-cloud solutions that were benefiting the bank and their customers.
So to summarize, we've taken you on a bit of a journey today. The National Australia Bank, Tier 1 bank in Australia, 30,000 plus employees, 9 million odd customers. We work with them to build a migration muscle. We trained that muscle. We really worked to help them evangelize, got behind the leadership's intention to drive a mass migration, hundreds of applications in the cloud. We really walked you through today a summary of the challenges, the lessons learned, and we genuinely hope that you have got something out of it and that you can take this back to your own organisations and really think about the concepts and the learnings that we've provided to you here so that you too can go on a similar journey. And with that, we'll close and thank you very much.
Thank you all.